This week, the Bullbarians are at the gate. We have a partnership with one of the big four, ETF news, and the launch of a brand new lending platform on Hedera. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to bring you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So Hedera is a top-tier project, and the HBAR is quickly starting to follow behind. That said, when I personally think about blue chip crypto, I think about the top 5 non-stable coin tokens on CoinMarketCap. So while HBAR has made a lot of progress, I still think there's a lot of work to do, but I think we're going to get there, and here's why. Hedera is going to continue to have major catalysts, as we've seen pretty consistently, some of which we're going to cover here today. And that will maintain excitement. Essentially, Hedera is going to continue to execute. And I think that with Charles at the foundation, the gaps that we've had are quickly going to be filled. But it's also about easy access to the HBAR. And with the work that Greg Bell and others have done, it looks like things are looking pretty bright on that front. As we've covered in the past, Bloomberg Intelligence predicted that the HBAR ETF would come before XRP and Solana. They initially predicted that a combination Bitcoin ETH ETF would be first, then Litecoin, HBAR, and then Solana and XRP. And just as predicted, the Bitcoin ETH ETF was just announced, so we're moving down that path as expected. Regardless if HBAR is before XRP and SOL or not, the HBAR ETF is coming, and when these ETFs hit, it's all about the cohort that gets exposure to these new products. Getting access to HBAR through a brokerage account means older millennials, Gen X, and boomers, the generations with the most money, will really consider HBAR for the first time, and I think Hedera will resonate with them more so than the other tokens that are going to be getting ETFs. To me, this means likely outperformance and HBAR potentially making a run to the upper half of that top 10. So we're going to get back to some of the ETF stuff a little bit later, but I also want to talk about the importance of some of the thought leaders in the Hedera space becoming go-to people for the mainstream media out there. And that's exactly what we're seeing out of Greg Bell. We had an example of that this past week, so let's take a look.
Tell me what your expectations are for the regulatory landscape as we head into this year and beyond.
Well, it's become very favorable, or the expectations are for it to be very favorable for U.S.-specific blockchains. There's been a lot of talk of strategic crypto reserves. That is both on the federal and state level. We're seeing that play out within corporations. We're seeing that internationally. Now, whether that will be Bitcoin-specific or include premier blue-chip assets like HBAR is to be seen. But there certainly is a lot of excitement around that.
So I really do think it's important for some of our thought leaders like Greg Bell to become those go-to people for mainstream media. So when anything comes up about crypto or HBAR specifically, they know exactly who to go to and they can highlight it like we just saw there. So I'm going to go back to one of these catalysts that we see. We see that constant drumbeat of new things coming out around Hedera. And one of the things that we've seen breadcrumbs about in the past was one of the big four consulting firms potentially coming on board with Hedera. And that's what we saw this week. Just a few days ago, there was an announcement of a strategic alliance between the Hashgraph Association and one of the big four, KPMG India to be exact. The goal of this alliance is to deliver co-branded enterprise-grade solutions built on Hedera in decentralized identity, real-world asset tokenization, and supply chain. One of the partners at KPMG India said, "We're excited to join forces with the Hashgraph Group to build innovative distributed ledger technology-led tools and enable digital transformation for our clients. This alliance is built on a shared vision of empowering businesses to harness the power of DLT, unlocking new opportunities, and creating lasting value." So this is a great example of how we've seen breadcrumbs around something for a really long time, and finally we get an announcement. But the most important part is execution and actually getting this stuff to come to fruition. So that's the next phase that we really want to see come out of KPMG and the Hashgraph Association. So we welcome back our resident council member representative, Rob Allen, to answer some of your questions. He mainly focused on a couple other topics, though, and one of them was a complete restructuring of the Hedera Governing Council. And that actually hasn't been fully announced yet. So we're going to hold off a little bit on that section, and we're going to include it next week in the full Shark Bites. But we had some really good stuff to come out of it this week as well. So let's take a look. Rob, welcome back. How's your week going?
Hey, Brandon. Yeah, a little bit croaky today. So I hope I hope the recording goes okay. Yeah, no, it's been good. Lots doing, lots on, and yeah, all the projects for 2025 are starting to ramp up now. So I'm yeah, really pumped and excited for this year.
Good. We're
Notwithstanding all the craziness that's going on in the background, and all the news coming out of the US. So there's so much to keep one's attention on while remaining mission focused on the projects.
May you live in interesting times. We're certainly doing that. All right. So before we jump into the community questions, I had a couple topics I wanted to ask you about. First, I wanted to get your take on Charles' vision from the interview that I did with him a couple days ago. You said you just watched it, so we're going to be able to get a fresh take. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, Charles and the Governing Council have been, discussing this for some time. And in fact, most of last year, while Charles was president at the LLC, he was regularly briefing, obviously, the board, but also the Governing Council. In the two in-person meetings we had in May and in November, they were kind of the bookends of quite a lot of activity, both, as I'll talk about a bit later, on internal governance and how the Governing Council operations run now and should run in future, and also the wider ecosystem and how Charles's view of how that should evolve over time too. And obviously now we know that it culminated all those conversations, the working groups, the support to Charles's assessments and analysis that were provided, culminated in him moving over to the HBAR Foundation, the imminent rebranding to the Hedera Foundation, the greater retail focus, in addition to the clearly superior enterprise use cases that we have. That the recognition, I think, from Charles with all his experience on other chains, his being the author of a book on community building. And many other reasons why he's the ideal guy for the job. In the ideal role for the job, President of Hedera gave him the position to be able to consult across the ecosystem with all the major ecosystem partners, with Hashgraph and the founders, with the Governing Council itself, with THA and THF. And obviously, THF had its problems last year. In fact, the whole ecosystem had its problems last year. I mean, memories are short, aren't they? But cast our minds back a year. We're in a not the same place as we are now, and that's largely due to the recognition that it was time to course correct, to do some new things, to actually address for Hedera what the rest of the Web3 space already knew and we're already executing upon. And I think Charles in the interview talked about that quite eloquently in terms of growing the developer base, ensuring the ecosystem integrations were in place, providing developer grants from the grassroots up, ensuring that you've got all of the basics in place before you start throwing massive multi-million grants into the ecosystem and expecting them to stick. And some do and some don't. But if you're building on an island, then it's very difficult to attract the builders who are used to building cities elsewhere. So you need the bridges, you need the oracles, you need the custodial wallets, you need all of those ecosystem integration points. And as chair of CorpCom through the last year or two, that was one of my primary focuses and continues to be one of my primary focuses, ensuring we have all the ecosystem integrations in place that the rest of the Web3 community expect, or the other chains expect, or have invested in, or have put in place first. Growing the developer communities. And it's not just about, attracting Solidity developers onto EVMs. It's the tooling that they expect. And of course, Hashgraph spent the best part of the last year, 18 months, ensuring we have EVM equivalents. And that means the tooling. That doesn't mean necessarily just the fact that your Solidity runs on those EVMs in the same way. So all of these are kind of basic hygiene. I mean, it's not apparent, I guess, unless you look at it, but there's a Web3 playbook that most of the other chains, certainly the successful ones, run, and it's do the basics, build the community, get a real buzz going, then issue the token, then use the funds raised from that to grow the community, create more of a buzz, ensure, as Charles says, there is demand from exchanges, demand from the community for exchange listings, not just paying exchanges to list your token. You get a long way down the line if you, at the back of the queue, if you don't have people shouting for you. Same with custodial wallets, same with bridges. So you need all of these things in the right order. And we hadn't done that. Hedera had been enterprise grade and enterprise focused, so did it like an enterprise would do it, without actually fully understanding that was out of order. So the Hedera 2.0 reset is largely about that. Charles has ensured that reordering has now happened and is in a position with the foundation and the allocation of the treasury in order to be able to do that. Of course, things change. So, we've got far more friendly, far more positive regulatory tailwinds now. So, one doesn't want only good generals, one wants lucky generals. And Charles is a particularly lucky general in this instance because, the change in sentiment coming out of the US now is perfectly timed for what we're now doing. The increase in price extends our runway, which means that we can do a lot more with the treasury. He can do a lot more with the treasury he has, and then we've got all the narrative changes. So tokenization with ETFs, institutional attraction at the same time as AI, at the same time as DeepIn. Sustainability continues to be a focus. So all of these things we're at the heart of. And I think Charles is now kind of reorging and creating the team that allows him to really drive hard and fast now. So, I'm very, very excited. I mean, it may come across in what I said, but I've been a supporter of Charles through this process. I completely get his vision. I hadn't understood the Web3 playbook in the way that he deeply understands it, but it becomes perfectly clear. It became perfectly clear early last year when he was, telling us that Hedera had been doing it a little bit in the wrong order, and therefore we had to change.
So, Rob, the way it manifested itself in the community, the frustration, it came out around compensation of employees and how they were utilizing HBAR for that, and that contrasted against staking rewards or lack thereof as far as staking rewards. Do you think those were the core issues, or do you think that the core issues are elsewhere, what you just talked about, what Charles talked about, and do you think some of those other issues are still need to be addressed?
I think those symptoms rather than core issues. I mean, there are a number of core issues, and we don't need to rake over the embers at this stage when there's so much positivity. There are. I mean, staking is we're unique in terms of staking because we've got native staking as well as partners providing liquid staking. There are parameters set on our native staking which need to be changed at CoinCom and by the council. And they've been set with fairly constraining parameters at the moment, which would need to be voted on by the governing council to change. That's always possible, and CoinCom's objectives this year continue to have keep a weather eye on those. There are levers that Charles can pull at Foundation. He can fund account 800. He can work with some of the liquid staking providers to boost yield. He can do all sorts of things, many levers to try and have the same effect as I think you're suggesting in terms of liquidity or drawing liquidity in. We're seeing, and I don't know how it's being done, but we're seeing a lot more USDC liquidity being created within our network. There's a suggestion that may have been one of the governing council members, but it may not have been. So, that's great, right? I mean, we want to see these surprising flourishes of new kind of liquidity coming into the Hedera network. And that may or may not be something that is down to the foundation. I suspect it might be. And what was the other part? On the sentiment. Yeah, so, the beginning of last year was probably related to decisions that had been made previously. So, when the foundation was set up, it probably set up with, I was there, I know it was set up with a particular strategic approach, which many of us didn't necessarily agree with. And I think culminated 18 months or so later with a lot of the problems that we saw this time last year, which then ran their course, ultimately came to a head, and were corrected. And now we're in a place of huge positivity. The organizations have kind of, I think, are right sizing, because they have to be a lot more commercially focused, a lot more sustainable for the long term. That takes time. You were talking about compensation packages. No organization can support sustainable over compensation for underperformance over any time period. And I'm pretty confident that Charles believes that too. So as the leader in that particular organization, I'm sure he's got across that, or he's getting across that, as are all of the ecosystem partners.
I'm going to get to Matt and Hargan, who says, it's been a while since we started hearing about AP Plus on Hedera and still no launch. Is it still happening behind the scenes, or are we slowly forgetting about it like Coupon Bureau and Atma?
Yeah, that's a bit of a salty question. Yes, there's a lot going on. I can't talk about it, but I hope to be able to talk about it very soon. There's a lot of public stuff coming up, and that will be a catalyst for being able to talk about what we've been doing.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe we'll go through these pretty quick. The next one comes from Carlos J557, who says, given that the entire supply of HBAR will be allocated at some point, I understand that the only way for businesses to acquire HBAR will be to buy it from other HBAR holders. That being said, is the possibility of renting HBAR to use them for transactions rather than acquiring them being explored? That would create a new business model in the ecosystem and a new source of income beyond staking for HBAR holders. So to start off, it's not like you just hold the HBAR and it's like a pass, so you get to use the services. You actually have to spend them. So it's a one-way street. So it is possible to borrow the HBAR. We have two platforms right now in Bonzo and Sirio where you could deposit USDC and borrow the HBAR and use those for the services. But eventually, you are going to have to acquire those HBAR again to be able to pay them back, unless you want to pay the yield in perpetuity, which I don't think too many businesses are going to want to do. Why wouldn't you just buy it?
You just buy it.
Exactly. You might as well just buy it. But Rob, you have mentioned in the past that there are challenges to enterprises going out and buying the HBAR to use these services. So there could be some business opportunities around that. What are your insights?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the beauty of Hedera is that it's the prices are fixed. So transaction prices are fixed in US dollars. So if you're buying at spot, so you're buying at the current market price, you're still only paying 1/100% or a 10% in terms of HBAR. Yeah, I mean, everything's changing, right? I mean, like you said earlier, interesting times. And possibly, and I think very likely, enterprise risk aversion to holding a cryptocurrency like HBAR could change very quickly, right? Slowly, then everything at once, right? So, but there will still, I suspect, be pockets, and not every jurisdiction follows the US. I mean, thank heavens. So Yes, there are services I'm aware of that will provide that kind of abstraction away from having to hold crypto on your balance sheet or within some kind of operational account to pay for those transactions, a bit like AWS credits or something, and that will then enable enterprises that are unable to do that to interact with the network. But yeah, I mean, the whole point of the HBAR, network, token economy and transactional network is that you buy HBAR to pay for your transactions, whatever they are. And like Charles was saying in your interview with him, there's a very strong focus in moving away from HCS actually into the higher value transactions with a lot more tokens being issued and transferred at 0.1%, a lot more utility and uses of the smart contract service. So that all generates revenue for the network.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. All right, so next up, Chaos 969 mentioned ICP and Hedera working together. Do you have any thoughts on that THA partnership that was announced a couple days ago?
No, it was a great announcement, and Kamal is always great with those announcements. But I have no insight on what that was.
Okay, it
was a pretty impressive panel, with Brother Musk there and Definity and Kamal all together. So I think there was a lot of conversations being had at Davos that will, in the fullness of time, surprise us. But I've got no insight into that one. I did ask Kamal, but he didn't respond to that particular message.
All right, Rob, that's all we have for this week. But I do know that you have one other thing that you wanted to mention.
Yeah. There's so one of my favorite projects in the Hedera ecosystem is The Mouth. I mean, they've been doing some crazy, amazing stuff over the last year. They've just had their X account banned or put on hold or something. So I'd like the community to just contact X support if that's possible, and if they're missing their mouth fix on X, then can you let X support know that they're not nefarious and doing bad things? They're just creating a bit of noise for the community and are doing a good job at it. So maybe you can show a link or something that the community can use to support the Mouth team. Thank you.
All right, Rob, that's all we have. I appreciate your time. And of course, I appreciate all the viewers for dropping those questions. If you have any more, go ahead and stick those in the comments. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brandon. See you next week.
So that was less than half of the entire Shark Bites. So definitely tune in next week when we post the entire thing that includes that restructuring of the Hedera Governing Council. So next up, I want to talk about the fact that I'm going to be launching an NFT collection. The Bullbarians are what I envisioned HBARbarians brought to life would be. Actually, I described what I was thinking of to my artists, different warriors from around the world with bullhorns to pull that brand together, and the result was so much more than I expected. I also wanted to make sure that we had some lady HBARbarians in there to represent the diversity we see in the real Hedera community, and when I saw what came of that suggestion, I asked for even more, and about 25% will be female in this first series. There have been some people that are curious about the max supply mentioned in the light paper. Now, it's been taking our artists several weeks to complete the first few hundred Bullbarians. So with the considerable time requirements, we're leaning towards smaller mints every few months of a couple hundred at a time. As we go through that process, I didn't want people thinking that the supply was unlimited, so I decided on a 5,000 max supply, which seemed like the right number of hardcore HBARbarian as the network grows. That said, I thought it would take several years to get to, but who knows how things are going to go. The reason why we started this was to support this channel, but the vision has already grown into so much more. The first thing we're going to do is set up a token-gated Galaxy world to get early access to content, but I also want to work with the Galaxy team to really see how we can explore new ways to use NFTs and maximize their utility, hopefully pushing this technology to its limits. But as mentioned in the light paper, the art stands on its own. Since this is an extension of trying to find new ways to support the channel, and we started with donations, anyone who donated more than the purchase price prior to the posting of the light paper will get a free mint in the second series. If you donated less than the purchase amount, you'll get whitelisted for first access into that second series. The Bullbarians are still being created, so we haven't nailed down a date, but I expect the mint to happen in the next few weeks. I'm hoping that this NFT not only allows me to continue to create content, but also helps some of our NFT infrastructure providers like Centex and Kabila, as well as Galaxy and KiloScribe, to continue doing everything that they're doing as well. So the next thing we want to touch on is the HBAR has been included in a US-centric crypto index put out by GMCI. We've said it over and over that being in these indexes are important to potentially be included in basketed crypto ETFs, and there's no question that we'll get every kind of crypto ETF you can think of, including a US token product. We also had some negative news that was brought to light by longtime HBAR Tata. Apparently, right after the Coinbase 50 crypto index that included HBAR was announced, the HBAR was removed from that index. I had no idea that this happened. This was back in November, and at the time I was relieved that HBAR was included because HBAR had dropped from in the mid-30s on the CoinMarketCap list to just about 50. While I don't have a definitive reason as to why the HBAR was cut, I think the drop to the number 50 slot could have something to do with it. The key is to be too big to ignore, and I think that's exactly what's happened since, with the HBAR rising to the mid-teens on the CoinMarketCap list. The next evaluation of the Coinbase 50 components will be on February 24th, and if we hold in the top 25, I would be shocked if it's not added back in. We also have some good news coming out of Coinbase, though, and that was the announcement made that Coinbase is looking to add futures markets for both Solana and the HBAR. This addresses one of the few potential roadblocks that was mentioned by Eric Balchunas from Bloomberg for a potential HBAR ETF. So a huge shout out to Coinbase for filing to add the futures. I'm also happy to see that this news has been picked up by crypto influencers and media across the board. Now we're going to hop over the big pond to our Korean connection, Kimchi HBAR, who highlighted that one of the main financial media outlets in Korea was highlighting the Hedera network. They discussed the American origins, the founders, Mance and Lehman, working as professors at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and how this might allow them to better navigate the American regulatory landscape. They also covered the HBAR ETF filing, RWA applications, and institutional interest in the network. It was nice to see. It looked like a financial network covering any company or stock out there, and they suggested that their viewers take a look at HBAR. The Asian markets, particularly South Korea, are really important to the crypto space, and here's just another example of them taking notice of the HBAR and Hedera. Taking a look at Hedera's stablecoin landscape, there were reports that the USDC minted on Hedera had doubled early this week, but that fell down just a day later, and right now it's showing about $34 million. One of our longtime Hedera community members, Rapunzel, has been doing great analytical work across the space, but has been focusing on USDC lately and noted that it appeared as if Aberdeen, the Hedera Governing Council member, might have minted to fund a US dollar liquidity fund. Now, just looking at the metadata on these tokens can be misleading and even can point you in the wrong direction, but it's still interesting to see. Brady also noticed some interesting findings this week. He noted that account 0.0.439717 is holding $214 million in native USDC. At first, rightfully so, he assumed something was happening. Then he did follow up with a couple updates. He said it looks like that account is Circle itself, and when this account holds the USDC, it's not considered active liquidity. He still thought it was a good sign, and I absolutely agree, but he had a second update saying that he learned something. He said pre-minted treasury is standard practice for Circle and not indicative of anything coming. But either way, it's going to make for some good conversation with Brady. We're going to be doing a DeFi Corner with Brady on Sunday, so tune in for that. Next up, we're going to stick with the DeFi space. We're going to talk about a new lending platform that's built on Hedera, Sirio. I caught up with Gika. He is the founder of Sirio, to give us some more information. Gika, welcome, and congratulations on a successful launch.
Thank you, and we are really grateful for everyone that contributed to the launch of Sirio. I mean, we look forward to do even better than we are doing right now.
Well, it seems like everything's going really well so far. To start off, can you just tell us what Sirio is and tell us how the launch has gone so far?
Well, I will start with the launch. I think that we are having a really successful launch, more than 1 million and half in total value locked in less than 48 hours. And we are getting a lot of new suppliers every day. If I'm not wrong, 100 new users every day around. And also transactions are great. We are like receiving a lot of good feedbacks on user experience and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, again, congratulations. It seems like it's going really well. So the next thing that I want to ask is, of course, a network like Hedera, with how big we expect it to be, there should be multiple different lending platforms on it. And, we already have Bonzo. We love that team, but we want to have this kind of competition. So what makes Sirio unique?
Yeah, I would say I would change a bit the question and saying what makes Sirio different from any other lending protocol, because we aim to be different from any other lending protocol, not just Bonzo. Big shout out to them; they are nice. But what makes Sirio different is the unique approach that we are using towards the implementation of AI. So basically, we are using and we will be using AI mainly for two things. In my opinion, the most important ones nowadays in lending protocols and Web3 in general, which are risk management and later, this is a small spoiler on user experience. Regarding risk management, we are basically going to release in a few weeks a machine learning model that is capable of predicting the risk that are associated to a loan one moment before the loan is executed, so that we want to give another solution, permissionless and censorship resistant, for every borrower on our platform, and make him more aware of the risks that are associated with their loans, instead of the typical solution that are provided by top-notch protocols like Avi or Compound, where they basically force somehow users to loan specific and maximum amount. And yeah, this is the first thing in risk management. And second thing that we really want to push is the introduction of AI for user experience. So I would say that within this year, you can imagine Sirio like the hub of Hedera and Sirio liquidity, where you can perform just by telling to an agent what the strategies that you want to do, or getting them suggested by the agent, and you just have to approve transactions. So we really want to push on towards this path, and we think that AI has a lot to offer to retails and DeFi ecosystem.
Well, of course, we can't eliminate all the risks, but I appreciate your ambition in using these cutting edge technologies to enhance your product. So, what products are available now? What services are available now on Sirio? And what assets do you support?
Yeah, actually, everyone can do basically what is supposed to find in any lending and borrowing protocol. So everyone can supply and borrow assets. If you actually, there are a lot of, I would say, incentives for suppliers mainly. So basically, if you supply assets, you can farm the native token of the platform, which is Sirio, and you can later you will automatically become eligible for its airdrop. But actually, you can also borrow assets. The only thing is that we are actually keeping interest rates lower because we need liquidity to stabilize before. For mainly for security reasons, but everyone actually can supply, collateralize their assets on one end and borrow on another end. Regarding assets available, our aim was to include the top assets in our opinion that are actually available on the Hedera ecosystem, which are obviously HBAR, USDC, HBARX, SOS, XSOS, HSuite, and the PAC token. So I think that shortly some other assets will be included. Another big goal that we have for this year is to list big tokens with multi-billion dollars market cap from other ecosystem and give our contribution to the interoperability side.
So, Giga, of course, we're not giving any financial advice today, but you got into the lending and borrowing space because you're passionate about it. What lending and borrowing strategies do you like to use?
It's really hard to answer to this question because there are so many beautiful assets. There are so many good assets on the Hedera ecosystem. I forgot to mention that we also listed the H-Suite token, which is, in my opinion, a top tier project. Basically, the main thing that I would personally do is to leverage their collateral in order to somehow leverage staking solution of the other platform. So let's say that you have your HBARs available for supply, and you want to stake, you want to earn interest from another project that that is interesting for you, for example HSuite. So what you do, you supply your HBAR tokens on Sirio Finance. They become your collateral, and you can borrow HSuite tokens. So when you borrow HSuite tokens, they are like yours. You pay the borrow APY, it's called like this. So an interest, a fee that you pay annually. And basically, you can do like any kind of strategy that you want with these HSuite tokens. I personally would stake these tokens into the HSuite, for example, into the HSuite staking platform, and you earn an additional APY. So you basically earn two APY. The first one that you earn when you supply HBAR, and the second one that you earn from the borrowed HSuite. And if there are tokens that provide like liquid staking solution, such as HBAR X or SOS, what you can do is to earn 3 times the interest, because you can supply HBAR, you can borrow HBAR, you can the borrowed HBAR, you can deposit them on Stader, and you get the HBAR X that you can supply one more time to Sirio. So you earn like 3 times an APY, and you can basically do the same with SOS. And another quick spoiler with PAC token.
Awesome. And of course, PAC, I believe, is paying 5%. You can do that really easily just through their wallet. So how can people get started? What's your website and so forth?
Yeah, people can find. I would say that we are trying to provide the best user experience that we can. Our user interface was designed by Trezor, so he was a really big player. And basically, everything that they have to do is to go to app.sirio.finance, and they can connect their wallet, their Hashpack wallet, Kabila wallet. And if they are on mobile, I would suggest to go for Wallet Connect, which is also available. And then everything that they have to do is to click on the Manage Position button on the beside of their favorite token, and they can supply. This is the first thing. Once you supply, a word opens to you, so you can like borrow, you can withdraw your assets that you just supplied after earning interest. You can do anything. And if you buy Sirio Finance NFTs like Cosmic Cipher or Nebula Genesis, you can also have additional benefits, such as you can get a multiplier on the airdrop of Sirio tokens that you are farming when you supply, or you have zero withdrawal fees.
Well, Gika, I think you guys have done a great job so far. Well done with the launch, and good luck in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your effort.
Now we're going to move from Hedera DeFi into Hedera Gaming. There's a team that has been flying under the radar, but I don't think they should be. Now, we've talked about them in the past. It's Circle of Games. Circle of Games is going to have a suite of casual games incentivized with a Hedera token, and I can't wait to try out what they have to offer, but I'm waiting for their token to launch, which really doesn't seem too far off at this point. Full disclosure, I did get in on the COG pre-sale. That was a long time ago, so I'm looking forward to all this stuff coming to fruition. All right, now we're going to move on to some stuff for our developers out there. I've been watching one of the new DevRel team members over at Hashgraph for a while. He's putting out some really good content on X and elsewhere. It's Jay Cool, so let's listen to what he has to say. Jay, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on, Brandon. I'm a big fan. So to be on it is I'm very, very proud and very happy that you invited me.
Well, I'm a fan as well. I've seen some of the content that you've put out. It's certainly helpful for developers out there. But to start this off, can you just tell us what brought you into the Hedera space?
Of course. So I've been in the space for about 3 years now. And I came into the crypto world more as a quote unquote investor. So just sort of looking at Bitcoin,
Sure.
looking at Ethereum and buying the tokens. And then sort of given I had a developer background, I started looking more into, okay, wow, well, you've got in Ethereum, you've got smart contracts. So I started looking at Solidity development. And then specifically in Hedera, well, that was when, it's a really funny story, actually. One of my buddies, he came to my house, came knocking on my door. Me and him, we were both really into crypto again from the investment perspective. And he was like, Jake, have you heard about HBAR? And I'm like, what? No, I've never heard of HBAR, never heard of Hedera. Anyway, first thing I do, I go to the hedera.com website, and you know the homepage, you see all of the big companies, the governing council, you're like, this is interesting. Scroll down a bit, and I remember sitting at my desk and looking at that table, and it goes Bitcoin, and it's got that column of Bitcoin and the speed, the finality, the cost per transaction, the kilowatt hour usage. You know exactly which table I'm talking about.
Sure, of course.
Then you see Ethereum. Again, I had experience developing with Solidity smart contracts in Ethereum. And then you see Hedera, and you're like, okay. So you I'd seen the governing council, the raw data as to how good it is. And that piqued my interest. As a developer, went straight to the documentation, and sort of within about 10 minutes, I was doing the Alice and Bob examples, transacting, creating tokens and sending it from Alice to Bob, and then sort of seeing it on Hashscan within sort of seconds. And again, with my background in Solidity development on Ethereum, which, I mean, this was 2-3 years ago, where even some of the test networks hadn't been created. It was that there was still this thing called the Gurley network, where you have to use, I mean, you only get something like 0.1 ETH every single day. It was so rare that the testnet token actually had value. And because of that, you could only really do like one smart contract deployment every single day. And it was a really bad developer experience. Take about 1 or 2 minutes to deploy a smart contract and then see it on Etherscan. And then I contrasted that with my experience on Hedera, which was just speed. You never had to worry about, oh no, I'm not going to have enough testnet HBAR to deploy my smart contracts or just create my token. These things you just sort of never even consider. So that's really what got me hooked. And particularly about Hedera, again, it's you've got the smart contract service where you can use Solidity, but then you have the native token service. And me, I wasn't always a Web3 developer. Previously, I was just a sort of a web developer. So having those JavaScript SDKs where you can have a very traditional object-orientated way of programming, as opposed to having to learn and upskill yourself on Solidity, that was also quite a nice feature. And I think it did help me better understand the concepts of tokenization. Again, despite the fact that I had been deploying ERC20 tokens on Ethereum, and I had been using the smart contract first approach, having the native token service, I'm pretty sure, again, it's so far back now, and I've come a long way since then, but I do think having that sort of Web 2 friendly approach, it really improved my base knowledge of tokenization and of course consensus algorithms, because it sort of gives you the benefits of Web3 in a really friendly Web 2 environment. So yeah, that's how I came into the Hedera space, and basically been here since then.
Well, it sounds like it was a good experience from the beginning, and it also sounds like it's somewhat paying off. Hedera always highlights how few Web3 developers there are out there, and then this huge pool of Web2 developers, and it seems like it's working out considering that you were a Web2 developer first.
Totally, and I mean, I think when you look at all of the big players within the ecosystem, I mean, your people like Hashpack, Pluto, your people over at sort of Michael Cantor over at Kilo Scribe, Patches, all of these guys have an affinity with the Web 2 aspect. And don't get me wrong, I think it's important to note that Hedera, we are totally EVM compatible. You can use your Web3 infrastructure and sort of take a Solidity Ethereum EVM style first. But it is definitely important to also acknowledge and drive the fact that, look, we have this really, really Web2 friendly way. Exactly like you say, most developers are not Web3 developers. Most devs have not heard of Ethers or Web3.js, but they have heard about, npm install that, and then I'm importing this class and I'm doing this and that and this, looking at the documentation. So it's a really, I look at it as a really good on-ramp to sort of learn about Web3. And I guess that leads into one of the questions later on, but I can go into more detail then.
Sure. Well, the next thing I want to ask you about is we've seen some of the stuff that you've done publicly. You seem like you're passionate about what you're doing, but can you tell us about a little bit more about what your role is at Hashgraph and what your goals are?
Of course. So I'm currently in the developer relations team. And the way that I like to think of developer relations, and it's not sort of it's a pretty new job in terms of you didn't have developer relations teams 20 years ago. But the way that I think about it, I'm kind of a salesman for developers in the sense that traditionally in sort of non-technical industries, if I want to get someone to be using a technology, if I want to get someone to use my product, I need to go to sort of business decision makers and pitch it to them. Whereas with technology, it's different, because with technology, if I'm a CTO and I'm going to be deciding let's invest in AWS, or let's invest in Azure, or let's invest in Ethereum or Hedera, part of that decision is going to be not necessarily made by the people in my team, but it will certainly be influenced by the developers, the project managers who are off their own back playing around with particular technologies. And then there's sort of that internal discussion. Manager, have you seen this new ChatGPT OpenAI API? Yeah, let's have a look into it, spin it up locally, build some proof of concepts internally. So while developers and sort of tech teams, they're not necessarily the decision makers, they are definitely decision influencers. And if we can make that experience for developers really, really easy, so that they hear about Hedera and then 5 minutes later they've deployed a token. They've been able to use their existing Web3 skills or use their Web2 familiar JavaScript SDKs. That's going to be a way where ultimately you can then convert them and get them onto using the Hedera tech stack, get them to influence their decision makers. So that's why I describe it as a salesman for developers. Within Hashgraph, we also mentioned that DevRel is one-to-many. So we've got a developer, we've got our developer advocates, which are kind of similar to developer relations, except they're more focused on, okay, client wants to build on Hedera, that one-to-one relationship, make it as easy for them as possible. Whereas DevRel is one-to-many, it's getting as many people as possible, hosting things like hackathons, creating the content which I'm doing, documentation, making it so that a wide body of developers have a successful time in the Hedera ecosystem.
Well, this makes a lot of sense to me in general, because you were talking about how the developers on your team are going to influence which direction you go. And we've seen that happen over and over again with Ethereum. And like you mentioned, you first played around with Ethereum, and we've seen a lot of things deployed, not necessarily because Ethereum's the best thing to do it on, but because the developers are most used to Ethereum. There's a lot of documentation and so forth. But I think things are starting to shift in different directions, and Hedera is one of those directions, of course. So, like I said before, you have an awful lot of passion. You can tell when you make your videos. What are you most excited about that you're working on?
I mean, my currently what I'm doing at Hashgraph, I've got a few different hats on. So I'm creating all of the content on the newest HIPS, which is the Hedera improvement proposal. Obviously, Hedera it's not a product which is done. We've got an amazing team at Hashgraph, and of course we're open source as well. So there's other people who can contribute, but we're constantly making the network better and better and better. And there's no point in creating a new implementation which makes let's say, scheduled transactions. There's just been a new release where now you can, as opposed to scheduling a transaction with a maximum time of 2 minutes in the future, now we can do 2 months in the future. I mean, this is a game changer. Another one as well, we can now schedule smart contract calls. So let's say I've got a smart contract, which, let's say we're doing like a bond, and I'm issuing a coupon. I don't need to necessarily click that coupon button. I can say, right, at the end of the month, I'm going to send this smart contract call, and you just let Hedera do it. So these are really awesome features which are going to enable a lot of awesome functionality. But if there's no one there to communicate it, it's almost useless. So that's one of the hats I'm wearing, focusing on the HIPs, Hedera improvement proposals, also working really closely with the HBAR Foundation, or the Hedera Foundation now, of course, where with all of their integrations and making sure that, again, the integrations which they're doing, and they've done some really awesome stuff with Chainlink, Layer Zero, Fireblocks, all sorts of awesome integrations, making sure that those are communicated to the public. So Chainlink is one which I just did the other day. There's a tutorial on data feeds. And the third hat which I have on is AI agents. And that's probably the one which I have the most excitement for at the moment, because AI is, along with blockchain and distributed ledger technology, those are the two things which I've really been investing my time and expertise in over the past 3 years. So having those Web3 AI agents, it's almost bringing my two passions into one place, and doing some really cool stuff with that at the moment. Hedera Agent SDK, open source AI agent library, which enables developers to start building with AI agents and generative AI in the Hedera ecosystem. ELIZA plugins as well. If you haven't heard of ELIZA, that's something which was started over in sort of the Solana ecosystem, but it's a framework to start building and deploying AI agents which can interact with Twitter, or X, with Discord, Telegram, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of cool plugins. We're finally getting our hands stuck in there, and I'm doing my best to help drive that as well.
Fantastic. So the last thing that I want to ask you about, you can put your salesman hat on. What would you tell developers that are considering entering Web3 but haven't decided on a network yet?
Yeah, well, look, there's only one which I can say. And it's definitely going to be Hedera. And I think for me, and the narrative which I've been trying to push, is the fact that it's actually just easy. And developing on Hedera, again, whether you are you're coming from another Web3 ecosystem, you're coming from Ethereum, or you're coming from Polygon, you're familiar with the EVM, you can basically drag and drop your smart contracts, place them into the Hedera ecosystem, and rather than sort of deploying a smart contract, deploying a smart contract which might cost $500 on Ethereum, 20 cents on Hedera, much quicker. But then also on the other side, if you don't have that experience, and you're sort of coming from a Web 2 perspective, where you're hearing about tokenization, there's a lot of nice price action happening at the moment, so your head's turning and you're looking at the blockchain space. There's a really nice developer path in for you as well, where you've got sort of, you don't have to worry about, what's an ERC20 token? What is ERC20? You go, well, a fungible token. So I can create a fungible token. That's the name. That's the initial supply. Then I can transfer it from A to B. There's a treasury account, KYC, all of these sorts of things, which are really nicely and easily presented via a traditional software developer kit interface in your language of choice. I mean, we've got support for JavaScript, Java, Go, Python, Swift, and there's even other ones as well. So yeah, it's really the ease, and it's not just the ease of the developer sort of friendliness in the sense that we've got pretty good documentation, which is only getting better and more refined, but it's also the element of the speed. And when you're developing, that's a really important thing. If I'm a developer and I'm running a suite of tests and it takes 5 minutes, I mean, that's just going to be, I'm going to be pulling my hair out. Whereas if you're doing it on Hedera, I mean, sometimes you can run a whole suite of smart contract tests and it'll be done in 20 seconds. So little things like that also make a difference. And I think, again, hitting home, it's just the ease of development, whether you're coming from a Web 2 or Web 3 background, whether you're coming from a business perspective and you're coming from sort of more of a decision maker, you've got that governance in place, which can sort of make you feel a bit more at ease that, okay, Hedera is not just a potentially scammy Web3 blockchain company, which you've got those guardrails in place, which is emphasized by the fact we have a good governance structure. But yeah, the ease of development, without a doubt.
Well, Jay, you don't exactly work in my wheelhouse, but I can appreciate, everything you're doing. I do love to see some of the things that our fantastic developers come out with, and I use those products on a daily basis. So either way, what I see you're doing is just a fantastic job. You're a great communicator, and I appreciate you coming on here today. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. Really appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch. I'm happy to come here whenever you want.
So I'm looking forward to talking to Jay in the future about new features that are coming out on Hedera and other things that might interest the Hedera developers out there. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into some Hedera network analysis and the HBAR market. Transaction volume is still cruising along at about 10 TPS. There's been 38,000 accounts created this week, 483,000 NFT transfers, 15,000 fungible token transfers, 328,000 HBAR transfers, and 87,000 smart contract calls just in the past 7 days. Moving over to the crypto and HBAR markets, crypto caught a bid midweek after the Fed gave the green light to banks to serve crypto businesses. But today we're seeing a downdraft as Trump moved ahead with tariffs putting pressure on all risk assets. Bitcoin is down 4% on the week and 3% on the day to $102,000, and HBAR is down 8.5% on the week and 3.5% on the day to 30.5 cents. HBAR is back in that same range we saw a couple weeks ago. We have support at 29 and 26 cents and resistance above at 32 cents. After that, there might be some areas of resistance, but I really don't care until we get up to 40 cents because that's the barrier that I really want to see us break. Looking ahead to next week, I'm going to try to get Greg Bell on to talk about those Coinbase futures and the impact that could have on the HBAR economy. I'm also going to, of course, have Rob Allen back for Shark Bites, so if you have any questions for him, go ahead and drop those down in the comments. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.